Hi, this is Gabrielle Celeste. Welcome to another episode for my YouTube channel. I'm an intuitive astrologist. I am a medium, tarotist, numerologist, all the things. And I'm also the co-host of the Spiritual Sisters podcast that I co-host with my siblings. So be sure to check that out wherever you listen to podcasts. So today we are going to be talking about the current Mercury retrograde in Leo. So this Mercury retrograde is actually quite nice because there are no challenging aspects that Mercury is making to other planets in the sky at the time of its transit. And that's not usually the case with Mercury retrogrades. So what you're going to want to consider is where Leo falls in your chart. And that primarily is going to be where you're going to be the most affected. So you'll want to see which house that particularly falls into. And you're also going to want to consider where Gemini falls in your chart because Mercury rules over Gemini. And Uranus just recently went into Gemini as well. And so looking to where your Gemini and Leo fall are going to be the places that you're probably going to be affected the most during this transit. And in addition to that, the themes of identity are really at its core for this transit. What is really coming up for you at this time can probably also be linked to basically taking it back to September of 2024, all the way up until April of this year, and obviously at the time of recording when this retrograde is actually happening. And the reason for that is because Mars recently went into Cancer and Leo and was retrograding between Leo and Cancer. And Mercury is now making a pass around that same area and constellation. So all this to say, the themes that came up during Mars's transit through those two constellations, especially with Leo, and now Mercury passing through there as well, you're going to likely see themes not only just related to identity, but also parallel themes for certain experiences that had actually happened around end of September to now. So let's go over some dates that are of key importance. And I'm totally going to cheat and look to the side. So Mercury entered shadow on June 30th of this year. And you likely started to experience or notice themes that came up and or are coming up at this time, beginning at the end of June, and are going to likely still be coming up through basically when Mercury leaves Leo and has fully exited its shadow period in August, which we'll get to. Mercury retrograde begins exactly at 15 degrees of Leo on July 17th. And you're going to want to look to not just where Leo falls in your chart at 15 degrees, but if you have other planetary placements at 15 degrees as well, because those are going to be affected directly by what Mercury is doing at this time. So just keep that in mind. Mercury is not necessarily making an aspect to the other 15 degree placements in your chart, but at other planets in the sky. So what I mean by that is that any planets that sit at 15 degrees, Mercury is going to be aspecting it. However, in real time, there are no other harsh aspects that Mercury is making throughout this retrograde season. So the Cazimi point is July 31st, which means that's the halfway point for the Mercury retrograde season for this year in Leo. So you'll have an idea of what's going down or what's really the theme of this retrograde aside from possibly identity around this period of time. And then the planet Mercury goes direct at 4 degrees of Leo. So he's going from 15 to 4 degrees. That's his retrograde period. So any planetary placements that you have between 4 to 15 are also likely going to be affected. And that's taking place on August 11th. And he, referring to the planet masculine tense, even though technically planets do not have gender, it's just easier to say that. On August 24th, Mercury is going to leave shadow entirely and retrograde themes are clear. So it's actually not a bad retrograde whatsoever compared to the others in the past. And we'll have another one in Sagittarius towards the end of this year, because usually what happens with retrograde periods for Mercury anyway is that they happen to fall in the same constellations. So usually it's all fire at once, air, water, earth, etc. And this year in 2025, we have them in fire. So I highly suggest taking advantage of it. I wouldn't necessarily start something new. However, if you have Mercury retrograde in your chart, natally speaking, retrogrades are probably easier for you and are very, you welcome them because you engage with the energy differently. You're built to, especially if it's retrograde in your chart. But it's definitely a sense of review, reflection, revision, the typical technological things that occur, having to do things twice and so forth. But overall, it's not that bad. So let me know how your Mercury retrograde in Leo goes. I hope it is easy and it is something that you look forward to. And I will see you in the next one.